firstly, I'm going to get down to asking an introductory question from each of the panelists, and then let's see where the discussion takes us. But I remind you that we please also want your participation and contribution by means of questions. Again, please raise your hand at the point when you become interested, and I'll try to fix that and send you a mic over with the help of our assistants on the side. But please do intervene when you feel that it's absolutely necessary. My first question will go to Ervinas, because he was indeed the introductory speaker, and having his presentation freshly imprinted on our mind, I just want to get the very general question out of the way. And it is that, that while you did give a very good presentation about the operational and business aspects of the projects, then I would also like to hear your thoughts. What do you think are the long-term implications of the Rail Baltica project for labor in general?
And yeah, so I think that Rail Baltica as such will attract, let's say, job places into Baltic States, and in particular into towns and cities that it operates in several ways. So first, while it gives access to, in the operational phase, while it gives access to the markets in the north, in the south, also in the west, and also transshipment from the east. So more companies will be able to use that, and more companies will be able to integrate Rail Baltica into their logistics chain, maybe even having that logistic costs slightly lowered by Rail Baltica, and also setting their business or expanding their business in and around areas where there are these intermodal terminals. So I think more companies, more manufacturing companies will happen sort of around Tallinn area, around Riga area, maybe around Kaunas area, and so on. So this is sort of more jobs in these areas. And we think that it is a good thing. Well, by we, I say I think it's a good thing. And second of all, I think that it's easier also for these companies to actually get these people to work in these companies, because now Rail Baltica sort of created your job place, and you can use also Rail Baltica to commute to your work, which I think it's very nice and can, in addition, have this effect of creating even more job places.
Very good. My second question will go to my compatriot, Toomas Tamsar from the Estonian Employers Confederation. I was just yesterday, right now in Estonia, the government is putting together the budget strategy for the next 4 years. And I was looking at the budget strategy that they put together last year for 2017 to 2020. And the number there for investment for the 4 years was 2.3 billion. That's government-led investment. And the majority of this was construction. RB project took only 200 million out of the project, but there was a lot of other construction there as well. The 85% was everything else compared to Rail Baltica. So this indeed means a lot of demand for labor and employment. From your macro level, how do you see that whether Estonia can hold up to this high demand, and what can we do about it?
Yes, thank you. As you mentioned in your introduction, our labor market can be characterized as under strong pressure, to be said very mildly. So we are losing about 1% of our labor force every year, and that's quite a lot. At the same time, our immigration policies are very restrictive. Nevertheless, well, our companies have managed so far, and what has happened really is that when you cannot hire people from third countries the normal way, what happens is that companies have started to use other channels. You cannot stop the river will just find other channels. So the most common way is to use rental workforce, which gets employment permits from Lithuania or Poland. We're sorry to lose the taxes to our friends in Lithuania, but what can you do? So, I mean, the experience is there. And I believe that although, of course, this will have a strong impact on our labor market, it will not be something that we couldn't live with. At the same time, the EU structural funds period will end in 2020, and we don't know what will be the budgets for the next period, but we are quite sure that they will be smaller, and the share of construction will be smaller in the next period. So I believe we can handle it somehow, but indeed it will the pressure on our labor force or labor market will continue.
Just as a follow-up question to really get a grip on the issue, so do you see that our current market supply in labor pool will be able to handle the increased demand in the next coming years, and we don't have to, as a government or as an alliance of three governments, take up some other measures to alleviate this pressure?
First, I don't think that the governments will do or will have any special efforts, at least in Estonia. I don't think so. Labor market issues are very politically sensitive, and as we've seen, it's very difficult to solve these tensions in the labor market. So what I rather believe that well, most of the labor needed is here available, but there will be needs for additional labor, and our companies will find a way to get this labor, whether from the EU or outside the EU, and whether it is then through Poland, Lithuanian additional, in Estonian case, rental labor force. Well, Lithuanian migration laws are much looser, and I think for them it's still easier to handle it. So the answer is I think there will be no government, at least in Estonia, no government special effort for that. The companies will solve it themselves.
In that case, let's go down to a more micro level or a more local level, and I would like the following three participants to more or less answer the same question but with different variations. First, I would like to ask Kaspars Rokens, how do you see from the point of view of RB Rail, what will be the increased demand for construction in labor? Will the three markets be able to supply it, or do you have a backup plan where to get all the additional workers from?
Good morning. This is, I think, one of the toughest questions, and complementing what speakers yesterday said, that if we would have this crystal ball and predict whether we will be able to handle the ever-increasing demand for the labor. I have analyzed a bit on what's happening now in Europe. UK alone, on annual base from 2017 onwards to 2021, on annual base will require additional 35,000 people in a construction business, according to Construction Industry Trading Board. Latvia has lost close to 250,000 of the young labor in form of emigration to different countries. Whether we will have an ability to efficiently backfill the needs, I am in a serious doubt. I yesterday spotted amongst the audience some of the vocational school managers, and I think they should be here also present. We can't postpone the quick actions in a secondary school, vocational schools and universities for teaching, training, retraining the given resource we have. Naturally, we expect that anyone who would be able to lift a shovel by the 2019 will be engaged for the RB Rail. But these ages are gone when the most of the job was done by the shovels in sort of an efficient way. Today, thanks to the 3D modeling and GPS systems for the earth-moving machines, I think a different skill set is required, and that will sort of minimize the required labor force, and there will be more efficient ways of doing the same things. However, how to fill the gap of 13,000 people, predominantly consisting of blue collars, I have no idea today. I have no answer. So there are a number of large-scale projects running at the same time. In Denmark, tunnel connecting to Germany, Sweden is investing in high-speed trains connecting three large cities, Stockholm, Malmö, and Gothenburg. Finland has investment plans. So there's ever-growing scarcity of the labor. And I think somewhat we have to liberalize our immigration policies in all three countries to accommodate either the workforce from Turkey. Naturally, first resource would be Spain, whereas there's anticipation that close to 2-3 million young graduates could be available for the construction work, given that they are provided with sort of retraining.
But a follow-up question for you too then, to sum it up. So, do you think that there is a need in the framework of this project alone for the participating companies who will be winning the procurement projects to bring in additional labor from outside the three Baltics?
Ooh, not a politician, but perhaps yes. I think what we have to do is to look at what are the experiences of Scandinavians. Denmark being an example, when they've started to renovate or expand the subway lines. And the Danish market is small, very closed market, I would say, and consists of predominantly small Danish construction companies. With the scale of Europe, they are small, considered to be small, and they subcontract the labor. And in the initial stages of the subway construction, they contracted a Turkish company to provide the labor. So what they ended up was that they had to stop the works due to the work safety policies difference, the pay difference, and ability of the labor understand the local laws and language. So they had to stop, and they got kind of a resolution later on. But I think we will face the same issues.
Ervinas, you wanted to
Yes,
reply.
just an idea popped into my mind. So maybe, in addition to maybe importing some of outside EU people, we can try and bring some of our own immigrants back, saying you can now work sort of at home. There is a Rail Baltica project, there is sort of more or less guaranteed work for like 4 or 5 years. Maybe if you don't want to relocate back to home, maybe you can take a sabbatical from your sort of UK or Ireland or wherever you work, and take a year and come back here, so you can live at home, sort of, and improve in other Baltic states.
Next, I would like Ms. Baiba Fromane to answer the question from the Latvian construction company's point of view. How do you see numerically or statistically what the increased demand for labor is going to be, and how the Latvian construction sector hopes to cope with that?
As you see, of course, the same as in Lithuania and Estonia, the biggest problem is the workforce, of course, but it's not only this Latvian problem. It's okay. It's a global trend. It's going all around the world. Like construction industry is facing the problem with workforce. In Europe, in America, it's the same, more or less. We are, of course, looking and already importing workforce from Ukraine and Belarus already. It's not the problem and the new issue of Rail Baltica, no. And of course, I think we have to speak openly here that we will be ready and have to be ready to import workforce from third countries. I don't believe that those who are working now in Scandinavia and having much higher wages will come back so fast. Probably some of them will, but not. This lack will be too big, and we cannot fulfill it with those people just. And the problem is that this project will go simultaneously in all 3 Baltic states. So we'll have to deal with the problems in the same time. We cannot take Lithuanian workers or Estonian workers. We have to tackle the problem by ourselves in all countries at the same time.
Your resume and CV is in some ways similar to mine. You have also served long as a political and policy civil servant, as a political advisor.
I really cannot hear.
Sorry. Your CV is very similar to mine in terms that you have served as political and policy advisor to many ministers and MEPs. What do you see from the Latvian political side? Do they appreciate the problem And is there anything in the pipelines that Latvia plans to do as a government, as a state, about immigration and labor issues?
I think the main problem is to speak openly about immigration. I think that's the biggest issue, at least in Latvia. That's we are waiting really for ours to come back more than to say that we have to understand what immigration policy and which countries we are looking to have a workforce from whom. And I think the second problem is to, also yesterday we spoke, that all three Baltic states have to look at this problem together, and probably there are, for example, to ease the work permit procedure, to understand how we can recognize all this in all three Baltic states at the same time. And not to look in just our country, but probably look in some issues which we could tackle together, also in political level, because now we are just talking each country separately in political level.
Now to Andres Trink from Merko. So from the Estonian side and our construction sector, how does it plan to cope with the situation, and where does it plan to attract new labor from, or is it even needed?
Thank you, and good morning. And before I answer the question, I really want to say big thanks to Rail Baltic Business Network for organizing this event and doing all the work around Rail Baltica project. I think it's a great platform. Seems like this project is going forward, so continue doing what you're doing. Coming to the construction sector, it's been a very strained market for construction companies from the workforce point of view already for a couple of years. I think 2 years ago, most construction companies did not foresee that on construction sites there will be as many people working from the third countries as there are today. And this is a new phenomena which is very much likely to continue. If we look at the increase in average wages since 2011, in all the three Baltic countries, there's been an annual increase of 6 to 7%, which means that over the last 6 years, the cumulative wage increase has been drastic. Which means that the input costs in construction industry have increased, while we have not seen the same increase in end prices. What we see increasingly, though, especially in infrastructure investments, is that when tenders are announced and the proposals are submitted, the prices exceed the expectations of the sponsors of the project. And from my point of view, it's two ways. Either the budgets for investments would have to increase, or we need to continue looking for cheaper inputs. I think the answer is probably on both sides, and also what was mentioned before is that the industry itself needs to find more efficient process and technical solutions, and the work in that regard is very much going on around the building information modeling, around new technology application, and so forth. At the same time, construction industry is competing for skilled labor with all the other industries. And the supply of construction engineers, specifically, for example, when it comes to Rail Baltica, with railroad specific knowledge and experience, is very limited. And that is a clear capacity constraint if we look at the demands of a project like Rail Baltica. Just to put this into a little bit of context, the total construction market in the Baltic countries last year was pretty much around 6.5 billion euros, according to the statistics. So that's pretty much the size of the total investment of the Rail Baltica project as we know it today. Which means that if that cost is spread over a 5-year period, that means pretty much a 20% increase in the construction market, all other things being equal. And if we have 60,000 people working in construction industry in Estonia and Latvia, and about 100,000 in Lithuania, you can only calculate that, it's not a linear dependency, but pretty much we're talking tens of thousands of people in terms of additional capacity needs. That's a statistical Excel calculation. Probably the real life will be very different. But that gives an idea of what we're really talking about here, what sort of magnitude for the Baltic countries we're actually speaking about. So from my point of view, there's no other solution than the investment budgets would have to be reviewed. We are facing the fact that the Baltic countries have become very expensive, and that needs to be reflected also in when we validate the assumptions for investments in infrastructure.
It only is normal for me to go for a follow-up here. If you say it out in numbers, and you just did, and while you admitted that it is an Excel exercise and that the reality will be constrained by other factors as well, but if you're saying that in terms of capacity we need tens and tens of thousands of additional employees because RB will add another 20% on top of the 3B investment into construction sector, then where, in your opinion, will this workforce come from?
If I would have the answer, I would not be sitting here, but would be working on the answer. The actual numbers will be different. I think the project will take longer. I think the budget will go up. I think there will be slowdown in investment in the private sector during this period when we talk about Rail Baltica implementation phase. There will be other dependencies. But again, the budgets would have to go up. There would have to be more people from the third countries. The wages will continue growing, so there will be more than one answer to your question, and somehow this project needs to be muddled through. How exactly? I think we will know more within 1 year time, when hopefully some more details about the technical design of Rail Baltica also will be more clear, and more answers to still open questions about how the tenders will be organized. I think fundamentally there has been a lack of long-term planning in infrastructure investments throughout the previous and also throughout the current EU funding period. And I think that has been one of the challenges also for the construction industry to make long-term investments in capacity. And actually trying to find answers to the questions that you have just brought up. And I hope that in the context of Rail Baltica, we also will have a more visionary and more, execution and management capacity also on the government side to have a long-term investment plan that is credible and will actually be followed. That allows the industry to have a more consolidated picture of what sort of bets they can take in the future. Companies are practical entities in that sense, and then very careful about increasing the cost base without having sufficient clarity about what sort of demand in the market there will be. It's in that sense a very volatile and practical industry, and I think when we talk about workforce mobility, it seems to me that construction people are among one of the most mobile parts of the labor market. They go where they get more paid, and that may continue. That may not continue. Who knows?
Something that you said really chimes very well with something that I heard yesterday. I was talking to head of Estonian Private Healthcare Provider Association, Ivo Saarma, who also runs one of the biggest private healthcare facilities, Ehitus, and he was participating in Estonia in this tender, which is financed with structural funds, where the goal is to build new healthcare centers in every county to bring together different healthcare providers in new concrete built private healthcare centers. And he just had to cancel also because their prices had risen dramatically during the tender, and it was obvious by the end of the tender that his business plan can be thrown out of the window because of the expected 30% that he was hoping to cover from his own finances. Now he's having to do over 55%, and this will just kill the whole concept. So it is the reality today. But I think from here it's logical to move on to Mr. Kaspars Rokens and ask that one of the issues that has risen here is this investment planning and the prices part. How do you expect and think that RB Rail or any other procurers in the project will be trying to grapple with this risk that prices will be rising through the tenders, and in the end of the day, you won't be finding participants with the prices that we were hoping to get?
Perhaps you are right, and this is unavoidable. It's difficult to predict how smart CBA study writers were and how smart we will be during the procurement process in order to keep on the budget line. This will be a challenge. My answer here would be very short. I think this will be a challenge. We are speaking a lot on the larger audiences, taking our chances to visit the road shows, exhibitions, and we are in the driver's seat of driving the process of innovations. Business network serves also the purpose for that. So the audience here and those who listen, the message is if you have a crazy idea, innovate and come to us in one way or another. Reach to us and share the ideas. Let us see how we can accommodate those ideas, whether we can capitalize then on those, and perhaps we would be able to minimize the requirement from the CBA expected 13,000 employee requirement down to 8,000. So that would be gain, and hence we would be perhaps back on the budget. Through the innovation, I think that's the key.
But is there anything you have in mind already, or have somebody floated already completely out of the box ideas to get that employee requirement down through innovation?
Oh, you're really pushing the limit. Well, I just imagine how the construction site looked like. We've been visited recently by one large Turkish contracting company, and when they constructed Merko line, the high-speed train in Morocco, they built actually the city to accommodate the labor. I think we talk about the different magnitude of labor engaged, but they had the hospitals, they had the restaurants, they had the clubs, and all that territory spreads for more than 20 hectares. So it's a village on itself. This is sort of sensitive when we look back for 80s. So whenever we anticipated a larger investment, and Riga was subject to the construction of a subway, we realized that allowing that to happen, we instantly will enlarge the territory of Riga. We will build an extra suburb to accommodate the labor. Where in the case of Morocco, they construct and then they move back or move on for the different project to deliver. But reality, I think here, there will be a campus. I don't know, a size of 5 or 10 hectares somewhere in each country, or perhaps even 2 campuses per country. And these campuses will have to be catered with services, whether it's lunch boxes, whether it's missing tooling, boots, gloves, for whatever reason. The drones can be engaged. Of course, there is no law stipulating the air trafficking, but the quick delivery from covering the distance of 10 kilometers from a canteen located somewhere at the restaurant, delivering the boxes, dropping them, and returning to the base. One idea sounds perhaps unrealistic, but who knows? In 5 years, perhaps that's a different reality. And there might be other approaches. As I said, GPS-aided earth-moving machines do the miracle.
Baiba, Fromane, do you see anything in the business model of Latvian construction companies, how to innovate out of this labor hole?
I think it won't be so sharp. In 5 years, I don't believe the construction industry will change so dramatically as we will use drones for every work. But anyway, of course, and we know that it's not the 19th century where the railway embankments should be built made with hands. It's of course we will use technologies, and that's one of the biggest challenges. But anyway, I think the most important thing is for contracting authorities to give enough time to preparation from starting moment, from signing contracts until real works starts, to plan all necessary, not just workforce, also materials, also metals or something that will need huge amount of everything. So and nobody will already start preparing until really contract will be signed. That's for sure. So that time is really necessary thing for planning, really, and not to shorten this time just to start work. That's really important thing.
An open mic question to anybody who wants to take it. I'm going to ask it from Ervinas, but anybody else can chip in as well. Is that we have talked about numbers and the statistics, whether the people are there or not. But another issue, and I think Kaspars touched upon it earlier on today, was the issue of also qualification. Actually, can our people build a railway? And of course, another issue on top of this is that these will not be tenders and procurements restricted to Baltic participants. There's a lot of other people and companies who will be looking at this as well, of course. But from the Baltic point of view, from the point of view of the companies that we have here as suppliers, are we able to build these things? The qualification of our labor, is that good enough? Or is there something missing in the puzzle, and can we do anything about it?
I can start maybe.
Yes.
So I think with proper planning, definitely it is possible, and in the Baltic States, I think many large projects are happening. We can take, for instance, this electricity, and then just in general, energy sector. So really massive projects are there, and sort of somehow they happen. And I think that if we are seeing 5 years in advance, definitely, and especially with a sort of amount of contracts and amount of sort of money that will be available on the market, so you can plan for that, I guess. So I'm, of course, not a member of the construction sector, but I'm rather optimistic about that, because you can plan. Of course, if you are just waiting till the last, minute, and then you say, "Oh my God, I can't do it," then it's hard. Yeah. What do others think?
One, two, yeah. We would have to break this project more into pieces, and there are clearly areas where I think both in terms of the expertise, qualification, and also capacity, there will not be big issues, provided that the tenders are well organized and make economic sense for construction companies to participate. At the same time, we have to be mindful of the fact that the high-speed railroad has never been built in the Baltics before. And also the project of this scale has never been managed in the Baltics before when it comes to infrastructure. And there are areas where definitely there will be international companies taking care of some of the more technical parts of the project, the superstructure, the electrification, the automation, the signaling systems, and so on. So it will be a combination of both local and international companies to actually provide the needed qualification. Coming back a little bit to this issue of capacity, I want to make one more practical point. And there is still a lot of local workforce. and also several infrastructure companies who are capable in executing, large piece of Rail Baltica over time. The question will be whether it will be economically attractive enough, the way the tenders will be organized, and the sort of risk and return balance is sufficiently optimum for actually utilizing the local capacity. If the standards are set so high that no local company can participate, there will be no use of local capacity. It has to come from somewhere. So the devil will be very much in the details. I think we're a bit early to have this discussion at this stage because the technical design is just starting. But when it comes to organizing construction tenders and setting the specific requirements for companies to actually come on board, that's, I think, will be one of the critical issues. What sort of qualification requirements will be set for local site and project managers? What sort of reference will be asked from local companies? What will be the contractual obligations and terms and guarantees? So there will be abundance of issues that will determine to what extent local construction companies actually are able and willing to participate. And the last point on this, I think, again, putting the numbers a little bit into the context. Construction industry operates, I would say, at 3 to 4% net margin profitability on average. So if we take a €6 billion project, that means the share of profit for the construction industry will be around 250 million, more or less, spread over 5 years, which means 50 million profit earning potential a year for the 3 Baltic countries, for the whole construction industry participating in the Rail Baltica project. That will be the name of the game, so to speak, from the construction industry point of view, to have a chance to participate in that profit creation. Is that attractive? Yes, but that depends very much, again, on the balance of risk and return in this process, and on many other things.
Kaspars.
Yeah, at the beginning of today's discussion, I mentioned that we have to engage with academia for the qualitative reason of the available labor force. What we see, there is a skill mismatch today, which has to be really closed. And that means that we have to go through the process of technology change, the sectoral change, and occupational change. I think we have to, and what we do to the large extent, we are the promoters of the project, and we drive kind of an image of a construction worker. It sounds a bit different. What do you do for a living? Do I shovel the gravel, or do I construct a century project, the railway project of a century? So how do we promote? And I think we can capitalize still on that a lot. And we have to emphasize also on the information source. I think it is suboptimal or underutilized. And the Portuguese, Spanish, Turkish, even to a large extent Polish people, they are not aware yet on the big project coming up. So we can, I think, gain on this. RB Rail should, I think, serve as a catalyst for the local enterprises to gain the muscle mass and enable in the future to participate in a similar project elsewhere. So it's a kind of a learning curve, and that will require the large contracting companies to invest heavily in the machinery. I think technology intensive investment is, I think, what we have to face now. And in combination with the modern technology, with tailor-made skill set of the labor, is kind of a key to success.
Many of the questions and issues we've raised today are shared by the 3 Baltic nations. It seems that as far as at least the labor issues go in the construction sector, of course, there are differences, and our politics is slightly different, but there's a lot more in common. And as a follow-up question again to you, Kaspars, on that issue, because you see the whole project from a 3B level more than many other of us here. What role do you see for intergovernmental cooperation on the issue of labor regarding the Rail Baltica project? And are there any ideas already floated?
We witnessed yesterday a good representation of government officials here in the first day, and I think we are aiming rightly to bridging the government officials in one forum to another forum, creating the work groups, dedicated work groups, and I think these formal and informal meetings and discussions will be more regular. And I think the wisdom somewhere will be created during the process of development.
But from the point of view of RB Rail or the whole Rail Baltic global project, will there be a point when the project management side will ask the 3B governments for specific policy change proposals, either on labor issues or on other issues which affect the project? Is there such a need, in your opinion?
Absolutely, there are needs, and I think we've started with a language issue. We talked upon the translation challenges yesterday, and imagine we have English language as the working language. We have an international team in RB Rail. Although the differences in language laws in the countries are different, I think one of the toughest is the case of Latvia. All the official documentation has to be translated in Latvian language, no matter what. So we have approached the government, and still we will work together, perhaps with professional associations towards it, to regulate the RB Rail as a special project and give a special kind of designation and to lift the requirement of the state language to the extent that we can work only with English. So that would be a success, and this is just a one step forward.
Yes, good luck with that, especially in Estonia. But I completely understand the project needs.
That wasn't encouraging. So,
guys, we have 7 minutes and 50 seconds to go, and I did invite you all to think about questions. Girts?
Get the mic? No? Mic somewhere around? Yes. I just wanted to pass to you, probably to Mr. Trink and Ms. Fromane, the question from yesterday, when one of the participants asked what are the plans for development of technical skills for the required workforce. And I just wanted to ask you particularly, how do, or the companies you represent, how do you invest today for the skills of tomorrow or 5 years' time, or what would you recommend for the business community to do? Thank you.
Yes, so the question was how do we invest in the future in terms of construction technology?
How do you support universities, schools, whatever educational establishments to improve technical skills and all the skills of workforce in Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania for future 5 to 10 years?
Long-term planning has become shorter in a very uncertain world, but you know, I can speak from the point of view of our company, and maybe Baiba can comment from the point of view of Latvian construction industry more. You know, there are different directions we're taking. I think the building information modeling area is something that is growing, and we are getting more and more people with that expertise. I think IT is coming into construction industry gradually. You know, it's growing your own breed, so to speak, within the company. I think project management business is a very person-specific and people-specific and culture-specific skill set. So we grow our own people. starting from internships. We have a program together with the Tallinn Technical University whereby we provide scholarships for interns. And I think that is a very important cooperation. That is something that we definitely would like to continue and grow in the long term. So these are maybe a couple of instant things I can mention.
Yes, it's really like a hard question because it's like long-term planning and short-term in the same time. About long-term planning, there of course are some programs we are discussing with universities which should like BIM and other which should be really put into this education programs. But if we need some specific competences, like for now, really I see that companies just sending their employees to other countries just to get this through courses or other programs. But it's really hard to make long-term planning if, for example, in construction industry in Latvia, I believe the same in Estonia and Lithuania, we can see in construction industry past 10 years has experienced like both rapid growth and really very steep decline, and it's really hard to plan what workforce will you need in 10 years and really investigate into technologies and workforce if you cannot plan what will be demand for construction industries after Rail Baltica and what will then go and what workforce will you need. But of course technologies and like really like business information modeling and other things, they are going on and will be like, we will see them soon also in Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia.
Yes, regarding the future, I've heard talk about the tunnel idea. But there were other questions, I think, in the audience as well.
Good morning, Arnis Kakulis, Managing Director of AECOM here in the Baltic States. Thank you all. This is a very particularly important topic for this project. I think the sentiment in the room is still, I believe, a little too conventional in its thinking. Of the construction industry, of the design industry. I think there needs to be a sea change when it comes to thought about how to deliver this project using very innovative thinking about how to reduce the need for labor in these next phases of the project. And I think it's time to work on the conventional issues of visas, of training the workforce that is necessary for construction, but equally amount of investment needs to be made in the design side to design the project so it does not require as much labor potential into the future. How to design it using the building information modeling, using other innovative technologies to think through how can it be delivered with less. And that may make the investment, the early on investment, slightly larger to plan, to think, to integrate the industry in creating these new innovative elements. But I encourage us all, especially the private sector and the private industries, to jump into the project, invest time with the academics, with the institutions to offer our best practices internationally to this project, to teach those here locally, to actually kind of cross-step the conventional boundaries of construction and of design.
Sorry, I'm going to cut in because Kaspars will have about 90 seconds to answer this if he can answer. So.
Well, I think, thanks, Arne. Yeah, I think you recapped what I've tried to say rightly. That's bridging the need from 13,000 employees, and if we could cut down it to a need of 7,500, 5,000, that would be a success through the innovations. And the drone was just, I think, something I'm passionate about, but it's not a kind of solution for everything. But through the BIM, through the capital investment and capital-intensive technologies, completely agree with what ICOM thinks of gain.
Thank you, but I'll use the rest of the 48 seconds to thank the panelists. So let's give them a big clapping.